What does a prophet sound like? How does their tone and tenor tend to summon our ears to a tune? What is the volume of one voicing this evocative vocation? Is it their rhythm and rhyme that resonates and resounds, or their poetry and pace that provokes and profounds? What do we expect of these ones who come to speak on behalf of the God who seeks the return of his people to his heart and his ways? What does a prophet sound like? Do we read the words of these orators flatly, tiny black on a white page, somehow tedious and dull? Does scanning with our eyes lead us to assume their message is comprehensible, comfortable, to lull us in our complacency and contentment? Does enclosing them in a closed book on our shelves imply irrelevance in our day when the world has moved on in so many ways? Or are we willing to pay attention to the intentions of those who are named in the scriptures as the poets and dreamers, the seers and hearers, the visionaries and wordsmiths, those calling out and calling in and calling forth the word of the Lord, provoking and confronting, hunting out injustice and invoking God's character and purpose, denouncing corruption and pronouncing destruction, and yet announcing restoration for those who will return their hearts to the heart of the God whose heart has always been for them? The reframers and restorers and reimaginers of ancient truths in new days, who paint pictures with their words that invite their listeners to paint a new world with our hands and our feet. The prophets were poets. They used words to paint images that give us an alternate way of seeing all that is happening. They use their prophetic words to rebuke and to critique, to speak judgment and to call for obedience and repentance. And they use their imaginations to picture a future where that repentance is fulfilled in renewal and worship. Poetry inspires our imagination, it evokes our emotions, but more than that, it seeks to move us to action, to transformation. And the 48 chapters of the book of Ezekiel take us on this incredible poetic and imaginative journey through God's calling in his life, his pretty strange visions at times, his message of God's judgment on his people's rebellion, his oracles for the surrounding nations, to his vision for a future, not only of his people restored back, but the whole of creation renewed. And through it all, he returns again and again to his simple refrain: then you will know that I am the Lord. So this 4-week series that Will has been leading 3 weeks of and has very generously allowed me to come in and get the best bit at the end on Ezekiel. It's been a journey through Ezekiel's life and Ezekiel's message to the people of God. In around 593 BC, Ezekiel starts in Babylon, a people in exile. And we saw in the first week, Will talked about Ezekiel's calling about obedience to the people, to live in God's will, to call them back to repentance, what they had departed from. And then the second week, this incredible story of this vision Ezekiel has of God's presence departing his temple, because his people have sought their security in idols instead of the living God. And then last week, let's look at the oracles against the nations, judgment for those who choose not to be part of God's renewing work. Well, today we come to these final 9 chapters of Ezekiel, this grand vision in Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48. I encourage you during the week to have a read of these 9 chapters of Ezekiel. It'll blow your mind. Because Ezekiel gives us his imagination for the renewal of God's people, and it is centered on a transformed people, reordered worship, a restored land, and the revealed presence of God dwelling amongst his people. It's a picture of hope in the renewal of all things. Now, hope's an interesting word because we can use it in a pretty wishy-washy way. I hope that, have a good day tomorrow. I hope the sun comes out. One of my favourite Old Testament scholars, Walter Brueggemann, says, hope is not naive optimism in the scriptures, but it is imaginative, risky, and eschatological. We'll come back to that word. He says, hope is an embarrassing absurdity that seems to fly in the face of what we are told are the facts. but invites us into world-transforming new possibilities that we can live in and out of now as we live towards the transformation of all things. Hope is a vision of what is sure because of who God is, that transforms how we live now because we live towards it with optimism, even though it seems unbelievable, completely at odds with everything that we can see and touch and taste all around us right now. Hope calls us forward. And so Ezekiel speaks his hope into the brokenness and the mess of his people's time to show them that this is temporary, that God still has something yet for them. It speaks to the ultimate fulfillment of this refrain, then you will know that I am the Lord, that they might know in the fullest experiential way possible. Now, the hope of Ezekiel is not a nostalgic hope. It's not a hope that looks back and says, if only we could go back to the good old days. It is, there's that word again, it is an eschatological hope, which simply means it's about the end of all things. It is a hope that looks forward to God's ultimate purposes for all of creation and leads us on. So how do we look at 9 chapters in about 20 minutes or so? Well, this morning I just want to focus in on 3 of the key images that Ezekiel gives us in these 9 chapters, and hopefully something of their impact, because he invites us to use and to engage our imaginations just as his original hearers did, using his words and using some images, that as our imaginations are engaged, maybe our emotions are evoked, but hopefully, like Ezekiel's original hearers, we are called and moved to action, to live forward towards this great hope we have. So I'm going to start with a very famous vision of Ezekiel's in chapter 37, and the words are going to be on the screen and you can read along, but you might actually like to close your eyes, because if you want to engage your imagination, sometimes it's easier with your eyes closed to just listen to the words and see what images it brings to mind. I was actually thinking as I was preparing this vision, there used to be a campsite here in New South Wales called Vision Valley. Did anyone ever go there? It was actually named after this chapter in Ezekiel. This incredible vision that Ezekiel has in the valley. Let me read it to you. The hand of the Lord was on me, Ezekiel says, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath into you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you and make flesh come upon you and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And as I looked, tendons and flesh appeared on them and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And he said to me, prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the 4 winds and breathe into these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I'm going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from them. I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. A vision of the valley of the dry bones. It's a vision that's fascinated people throughout history. There's been lots of songs written about this vision, them bones. as these bones come to life, dead, dried up, dusty bones, a graveyard of bones, turned into an army of flesh. And this vision is the promise to the people of God, that from death he will bring life. It's a very famous engraving by an artist called Gustave Doré about this vision. And I thought I would share it with you this morning. You might have your own imagination of what it looks like to see a valley full of bones brought to life. It's an incredibly powerful vision of life from death. And for the people of Ezekiel's day, who were in exile, who had no hope, who thought everything was done, it was over, there was no coming back. When you place bones in a graveyard, it's over, it's done, there is no coming back. And Ezekiel prophesies life and breath to the bones. Bones are more than death, they are the picture of total desolation and loss of hope. There's no CPR to be done when we're down to the bones. There's no revival, there's no resuscitation. The only thing, the only hope is resurrection, is the breath of God bringing new life where it was impossible. And to the people of Ezekiel, far off in exile, this is a promise that drives them forward, that gives them hope that God is not done with them. A promise that will feel fulfilled in its first instance when they find themselves back in the land in about 40 years' time. But a promise that actually points much further forward to the hope of resurrection, a promise that is first and foremost fulfilled in Jesus Christ himself, who enters the grave and comes through death and out to new life. When you imagine resurrection life, what does it call you forward? How does it call us to live? So that's our first image, life from death. In chapter 43, Ezekiel has another vision, another image that he paints for us. A little bit shorter this time, but let me read it to you. The man brought me to the gate facing east, this is of the temple, and I saw the glory of the God of Israel coming from the east. His voice was like the roar of rushing waters, and the land was radiant with his glory. The vision I saw was like the vision I had seen when he came to destroy the city, and like the visions I had seen by the Kibar River back in chapter 1, and I fell face down. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. Then the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. While the man was standing beside me, I heard someone speaking to me from inside the temple. He said, "Son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. The people of Israel will never again defile my holy name, neither they nor their kings, by their prostitution and the funeral offerings for their kings at their death. When they placed their threshold next to my threshold and their doorposts beside my doorposts, with only a wall between me and them, they defiled my holy name by their detestable practices. So I destroyed them in my anger. Now, let them put away from me their prostitution and their funeral offerings for their kings, and I will live among them forever." If you were here 2 weeks ago and looked at that vision in chapter 10 and 11 where Ezekiel sees the glory of God departing the temple, a vision of absolute judgment and despair as God says to his people, "I can live with you no more. You have so defiled and polluted. You have so worshipped anything else but me and put all your trust and security in the idols of your time that I am departing from my holy place." And here in Ezekiel 43, he envisions God's glory returning to the temple from which it left. God coming to dwell again with his people. Now, this artwork is a digital artwork that was just done in the last decade or so, trying to find pictures of how different people imagine a scene like this can be helpful for those of us who don't have a particularly vivid imagination, or maybe you have your own image on your mind. What do you imagine? What do you feel when you hear these words of God's glory returning to the place it has left? It's a picture of reversal, a picture of God undoing what he has done. That God has not given up on his people. But it's also a picture in those words of God purifying his people, making them holy so that he can return to dwell with them forever. The restoration that will bring this about is worship. God's people purified, sanctified, made holy so that they may dwell in his presence again, that God's glory may return. So we have a vision of bones, life from death. But now it's not just that the people are made alive, but that God is going to come and dwell with them again. As if it's not good enough that there's life after death, that there's hope yet to come. God is going to choose to be with his people once more. And I bet you, I love those words. They're so physical there, where God says that this is the place of my throne and the place for the soles of my feet. It's a very vivid image of God coming to stand, put his feet down on the ground and say, I'm here. This is my home. I'm coming to dwell with my people once again forevermore. God's glory returns and his holiness is renewed. That's the second image. And then the third one, chapters 46, 47, 48. I could read them all to you, but I'm just going to read you a few pieces from chapter 47 of this incredible vision. So Ezekiel is shown a picture of the temple. So God's glory comes back, and then the angel, the messenger, takes Ezekiel around this temple and kind of shows him all the different dimensions of it. It's quite detailed, this vision, and a little bit like the details in Exodus when they were first planning to build this home for God to dwell amongst his people. But he sees something new in this vision. He says, the man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water. Water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me through the north gate and led me around the outside of the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. And he said to me, this water flows toward the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, the desert, where it enters the Dead Sea. And when it empties into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. And swarms of living creatures will live where the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because the water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them, and their fruit will serve for food and their leaves for healing. Out of the temple, a vision of the river of life flowing outwards. A river that brings everything in its path to life. What do you imagine? What do you feel when you are invited into this vision? This artwork is a painting that was just done last year by a woman named Matilda Wenzel. Very different style of art, but again encouraging us to imagine this river teeming with life, with fish, with trees on the banks. A picture, an imagination that invites us into hope of what God has yet in store for his people. He will bring death from life, bones to life. He will come and dwell amongst his people, his glory in the temple. And out of that temple will flow life everywhere. And everything will be in its path, that is in his path will come to life and be a part of the restoration and renewal that God is bringing. You see how these three visions together paint this incredible picture of hope for the people of God. They are in exile, and the promise is not just that they will be returned, Not even just that God will come and dwell amongst them once more, but that God will then be at work in and through them in a way that brings life and blessing to the whole world. This is a restoration of the promises of God since the very beginning of the biblical story. And it's a picture of hope that both echoes Eden, the garden where God first placed humanity and gave them a river to sustain and give them life, but also a picture that anticipates the great vision that Jesus gives to the Apostle John in the book of Revelation, where the river of life, once and for all, flows out of a restored and renewed city that all are invited to dwell in and becomes a source of life for the whole world. And it's like in Ezekiel's time, you couldn't think of a better, more vivid image than the picture of the Dead Sea coming to life. The Dead Sea got its name for a reason. Nothing lives in the Dead Sea. If anyone's ever been to the Dead Sea, yeah, been there a few times, you can float in the Dead Sea because it is so salty that there is actually more water percentage-wise in your body than there is in that sea. And so nothing can live because it is so salty. A river so full of life that it can take the Dead Sea and make it a place brimming with fish and trees and fruit. This is God's presence, renewing and restoring all the things. And these fruit trees that grow on the banks, they bear fruit every month. Did you catch that? I don't know how many fruit trees you've got in your yard, but any of them bearing fruit every month of the year? Every month. Fruit that is. This is the absurdity of hope that Brueggemann was talking about, right? The picture that just defies reality, the imagination that drives us forward to something even more. Fruit born every season and leaves that are for healing. The same picture picked up in the vision in Revelation of the tree of life, which brings healing to the nations. Trees so powerful that they can actually bring healing to places where there has been war, conflict and destruction for generations. God's presence amongst his people flows outward. It overflows. His blessing goes out, healing the world. And so the message to the people of Israel, to the people of Judah in Ezekiel's day is God is going to bring you back, bring you to life again, come and dwell with you. And through you, he will bring blessing to the world. That imagination, that hope remains our imagination and our hope. The hope that God will bring resurrection once and for all. That those bones of the people of God throughout history, throughout generations, one day our bones, will be resurrected in the new creation, brought to life. How amazing is that? And as if that wasn't enough, that God will then dwell with us. That God will make his presence known once and for all amongst his people. And that presence will result in blessing that overflows and flows out to the whole of creation. This is an imagination of the renewal of creation, of the renewal of all things. And the picture Ezekiel ends his book with is the same picture that Revelation ends with. The picture of the city, because that is a picture that God has used right throughout the scriptures to kind of capture this idea of God dwelling with his people and his people dwelling with him rightly, in right relationship with him and right relationship with one another, holy worship. That's what the city represents in the Old Testament and throughout the scriptures. And Ezekiel ends this fantastic book, all 48 chapters of it, it ends with these words. And the name of the city from that time on will be, the Lord is there. The Lord is there. Yahweh Shammah. The Lord is there. Then you will know that I am the Lord, because I will be there with you forever, once and for all. And these words, I think, are what drives the imagination and the hope that is given by Jesus to John in a very similar vision in Revelation 21, where we read these words. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them." This imagination of the new creation pictured in the renewed city with Jesus at the centre on his throne and God dwelling with his people once and for all. That is our hope. That is our imagination. That is the hope that drives us forward. I have a confession for you. I became a Christian when I was baptised when I was about 15, 16, decided to give my life to Jesus and got very passionate about reading his word. And I got the message that Jesus died for me and loved me and saved me. I got the message that I was called to live for him and I wanted to devote my life for him. But the hope that I had of the future, the picture of where this story was headed and what would happen in the end, my imagination for heaven was shaped a lot more by Philadelphia cream cheese ads than the Bible. I said it was a confession. My imagination of the hope that I had in the future was what I now like to call white fluffy cloudland. Do you know what I'm talking about? The idea that the hope that we have is, if all goes well, maybe one day I'll get to wear a white robe and be on a white cloud and sing the same song forever. And here's my real confession, if I'm really honest, it doesn't really sound that inviting. And I remember as a young Christian thinking, I know this is the end of the story, this picture of heaven. I'm honestly not so sure if I want to go there because it doesn't sound that much fun. Our imagination matters because my imagination was so limited, my hope was so limited. Now I was still following Jesus. I was still living my life for him. But my imagination, the hope that I was leaning towards, was so limited. And I remember the first time I read Revelation 21 and 22 and this picture of the new creation of this city that people from all nations come to, and the glory and the honour and the splendour of all that has been created throughout the generations of humanity and history is brought into this city as the starting point of what God is going to do forevermore. This picture of a city where God dwells physically, visibly with his people. This picture of a place where there is no mourning and no crying and no death, where there is only life forevermore. This picture of a river of life and a tree that brings healing and blessing and binds up everything that has been broken, and all the relationships and wars and conflicts throughout the world are put back together again. Do you see why our imagination is so important? Why our hope matters? Because it leads us to anticipate, to long for, and to work towards what it is that God has promised. These visions of hope are not given for information, but to invite us towards transformation, that we might truly live towards them. Let me finish with another poetic piece. A vision of transformation, an imagination for all nations, an invitation of restoration founded not in a new revelation, but in the ancient covenant promise of God's nation. I will be your God, and you will be my people. You will know that I am the Lord. The biggest dream that we can conceive is a drop in the ocean of the plans and the purposes of the God whose imagination birthed all things into being, and whose vision extends to the renewal of all creation. We are invited to lift our eyes to the farthest vision our Father has given, to wait breath bated for that great date when what we see now with eyes of imagination, the resurrection our bodies ache for, the renewal our whole world groans for, will be the transformation of all things restored and the reality of our eternity forever and forever and forevermore. So how does this hope sustain us, remain in us, Constrain us to speak out and live towards this imagination that calls us ever forward toward him and toward his purposes. We too are invited to be poets, prophets and dreamers, called to see what our world yearns for but cannot name, to live out this hope with faithful teaching and imaginative preaching, declaring and reminding, envisioning and inviting, to be truth tellers, vision shapers, gospel sharers, peacemakers, weavers in our time and place of the eternal story, the God who holds time itself in his palm and is drawing all things together in his plan. Reframing the story our world tells itself about who and what matters, with the story of our world's creator who made matter in the first place and to whom it all matters. Reimagining and restoring the way things are with the way things will be, painting pictures with our words that invite us to paint a new world with our hands and our feet. Let me pray. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you that it speaks truth to us in so many different ways. It teaches and it instructs, it invites and it evokes. And in these visions in Ezekiel, we thank you that we are given pictures of hope. Pictures that spoke into the destruction and judgment and brutality of exile to lead your people forward, to continue your story into a new day. And pictures that we pray might speak to us today into our world of brokenness and mess and war and conflict, that we might be led towards your imagination, your plan, your purpose for the renewal of all the things. King Jesus, I thank you that you are at work even now, working towards that great renewal, that great hope, that great restoration. May we live into it with you. May we walk towards it, anticipate it, be hope-filled, but may we also be transformed to live it out in the way that we speak and relate and work and invite others to experience it too. I ask this in Jesus' name.